Hey guys, so I figured I would make a video of me going over some of the problems that you had to do last week, just so you can get a refresher on how to do the ones from today. Now, please make sure that you do out the work from the IXL today and don't just guess, and please upload your work to the assignment. Okay, here we go. So I'm going to start with number 1. So what you would do is remember there were 2 methods. There's box method and there's grouping. No matter the method that you choose, the first step is always the same. You first look to see if there is a GCF. Notice that this term, and this term, they don't have anything in common other than 1. So you wouldn't take out a 1. Once you determine that there's no GCF, then you multiply the first term and the last term. So I'm going to multiply 3 and negative 5. 3 times negative 5 is negative 15. Now we want numbers that multiply to negative 15 and add to negative 2. So you would look at your factor chart and determine that it ends up being negative 5 and 3. Now I'm going to do grouping first. I'll show you how to set up both of them. So if I'm going to do grouping, I would now take the original and rewrite it, but instead of putting negative 2p, I'm going to put negative 5p plus 3p. Okay, so it would be 3p squared minus 5p plus 3p minus 5. I could switch the negative 5p and the 3p around. It doesn't really matter the order that you put them in. Okay, so now that I have done that, next I am going to group the first 2 and the last 2. So these 2 in parentheses and those 2 in parentheses. Next, we take out the GCF of each grouping. So if you look at the first one, we have 3p squared and negative 5p. Those just have a p in common. So then you think about, what would I multiply this by to get back to 3p squared? It would be 3p minus 5. Now over here, we already have 3p minus 5. Remember that this and this are supposed to match. So 3p and negative 5 only have a 1 in common. You do have to take it out. Otherwise, you wouldn't have a binomial for the end. And so then this would stay 3p minus 5. Notice that these do match, which is what we want. And so that becomes one of your binomials for your answer. And then the p plus 1 in the front, so the GCFs, that becomes your other one. And so that's the answer to number 1. Now, if you were going to do this with box method, you need a 2x2 box. Then your first term, 3p squared, goes in the top left. Your last term, negative 5, goes in the bottom right. And then remember, with box, you also multiply the first and the last and think about numbers that multiply to that and add to negative 2. So it's still going to be negative 5 and 3. You're going to write those here and here. So you could put negative 5p here and 3p here. It doesn't matter where you put them. They're interchangeable. Okay, next, remember what we do for the box method is we think of the highest number that goes into each row and column. So the GCF of each row, each column in each row. Now remember, pay close attention because you want the signs of these 3 boxes. Whatever the signs of these 3 boxes are, that's what your GCF has to be. So watch. So for, let's do this column first. 3p squared and 3p have a 3p in common. Since this is positive, that one will be positive too. Let's do this row, column now. Negative 5p and negative 5 have a 5 in common, but since this is negative and that's closest to where I'm writing it, that has to be negative as well. So it's 3p minus 5 on the top. Let's go left to right now, this row. 3p squared and negative 5p, it's just going to be a p. Since this is positive, the p is positive. Then 3p minus 5, it's just going to be 1. Since the 3 is positive, this will be positive. Remember that the top becomes one of your binomials and the left becomes one of your binomials. Since there's no sign here, it's just positive. So see how that matches? 3p plus 1, p plus 1 matches with this, and then 3p minus 5 matches with this. So you get the same answer. So that's number 1. Let's do another one. I'm going to skip to number 4. Okay, so here's number 4, same idea. First, there's no GCF, so you're going to multiply first and the last. 5 times 12 is 60. Now we want numbers that multiply to 60 and add to 19. So if you look at your factor chart, it ends up being 15 and 4. 15 times 4 is 60. 15 plus 4 is 19. So if I'm doing grouping, I'm going to rewrite it. 5n squared plus 15n plus 4n plus 12. Then I'm going to group the first two and the last two. Take out the GCF of each grouping. 5n squared plus 15n, the GCF is 5n. So that's going to be n plus 3. 4n plus 12, the GCF is 4. That's positive. Okay, then you take the GCFs, 5n plus 4. That becomes one of your binomials. And then the repeated one, n plus 3, is your other one. And then that's your answer. I'm going to do the same one using box method now. So again, you need a 2 by 2 box. First term goes in the top left. Last term, 12, goes in the bottom right. And then 15n and 4n go in either spot. Now we need the GCF of each row and column. So 5n squared and 4n, it would be n. 15n and 12, it would be 3. 5n squared and 15n would be 5n. 4n and 12 would be 4. Since these are not negative, none of them are negative, it's all positive. Notice 5n plus 4 matches here. Whoops. Matches here. Oh boy. Matches here. And then the n plus 3 right here matches right here. And so that's your answer either way. I do want to remind you about how if you have a negative in the front, you have to take out a negative GCF. I'm going to do this one. I know that I said I was only going to do 2 of them, but let's do 3 just because I want to make sure you understand what happens when you have a negative when you're doing grouping. So first and last is 12. We want the numbers that multiply to positive 12 and add to negative 8. So that's going to be negative 6 and negative 2, both negative to multiply to positive 12 and add to negative 8. So if we're doing grouping, we're going to have 3n squared minus 6n minus 2n plus 4. When we group the first two and the last two, group the negative in there. So now 3n squared minus 6n, the GCF is 3n. In the parentheses is going to be n minus 2. Now with negative 2n plus 4, since this first term is negative, this is what I wanted to show you. You have to take out a negative GCF. So 2n and 4 have a 2 in common, but I must take out a negative 2. If I don't, what's inside the parentheses over here will not match n minus 2. So because I took out a negative, that's going to change both of these signs. So this is going to be positive n now, and then instead of plus 2, it's going to be minus 2 because negative 2 times negative 2 would give me positive 4. Now notice how this matches. That's what you want. So it's really important that if your first term is negative in a case like that, that you take out a negative GCF. And so then our final answer is n minus 2 and then 3n minus 2. So that's your answer. I may as well do the same one using box method. Let me do it over here. So 2 by 2 box. First term, 3n squared goes in the top left. Last term, positive 4 goes in the bottom right. And then we had negative 6n and negative 2n. Now remember, when you're doing the signs of these terms that you're writing, you're looking at these 3 boxes. So since this is negative, I know that one's going to be negative. Since this is negative, that one will be negative. Okay, now we're just identifying the GCFs. So let's see. Let's start with 3n squared and negative 2n. Is just going to be n. And it's not negative because the one closest to it in this box is positive. Negative 6n and 4 is going to be negative 2, and it must be negative because the one closest to it is negative. Let's do this row. 3n squared negative 6n is going to be 3n, and it's positive because this is positive. And now negative 2n and 4 is going to be negative 2 because this is negative, and that's the one closest to it. So see how 3n minus 2 matches here, n minus 2 matches here. And so that's that one. Hopefully this is helpful. I would highly, highly suggest that you come on during class time today, which is 11:10. If you need help earlier than that, if you want to get your work done earlier and you need help, I will have the ACLAB link open almost all day, probably starting at around 10 o'clock. I'll turn it on because I have my free period is first and then I'm off. I mean, and then I have class. So anyway, please let me know if you have questions. Hopefully this was helpful. And yeah, that's it. Have a great day.